Forget everything you've been taught at the wine school. You should not start assessing a wine by its appearance. Here's the thing. We eat and drink with our eyes, and we've learned that since we were kids, to decide what we like or we don't like. And what we see creates some big expectations about, the products, how we will perceive the product. And even wine experts get fooled. So I don't understand why nobody talks about it. But after watching this video, you will know why assessing wine appearance last is the most efficient way and the least biased way to evaluate a wine. You will also understand how those visual cues, what you see, can affect what you sense by smelling and by tasting. So by the end of this video, you will understand why it's so important to rely on your other senses, the sense of smell and the sense of taste, rather than putting all your efforts on the appearance evaluation. Hi, I'm Isabelle Leschab. I'm a wine sensory scientist turned wine tasting coach to help wine enthusiasts like you evaluate wine with more confidence and describe wine aromas through their senses. At InnoVinum Academy, I have trained hundreds of students to become more confident in their wine descriptions and their wine tasting notes by following a sensory training plan. If you attended a wine appreciation class, you probably learned the 5S method. You start by seeing, then you swirl, then you smell, then you sip, and then you swallow or savor. Well, here's the issue with this method. It starts by the see, looking at the wine appearance. And spending so much time evaluating what you see, the clarity of the wine, the hues and the nuances, whether it is effervescence, does it have legs, really, put you in a very inquisitive mode about the wine. And you start creating, some expectations, because the more you learn about wine, the more you learn that some of these cues might be related to winemaking practices, to, warmer, cooler climate, to an early harvest or a late harvest. And you start creating a story just by looking at the wine, rather than relying on your other senses to tell you exactly what the wine has to share with you in terms of their aromas and their taste. So you end up becoming a taster relying on deduction, looking at cues to detect something, rather than experiencing the wine, learning about, how the wine makes you feel, what you sense, so that you can relate your personal interpretation of those perceptions to the technical aspect of the wine growing and wine making. So looking at wine appearance first really doesn't give a chance for the wine to express itself through these other senses, because you have made your own story. And vision creates several biases, and I will share 3 for you today. The expectation bias. What you see creates some expectations. I mentioned before, you can expect to like or dislike a product by the color. If the color is, for a red wine, if it turns into garnet, maybe some slight, caramel hues or orange hues, you start to think about, maybe it's an aged wines. Therefore, what did I learn about aged wines? Well, I should have more tertiary aromas. So I should expect maybe leathery notes, maybe more cooked fruit notes, and less fresh fruit notes. So you start, creating these expectations. And when you pursue your evaluation, you are looking for those additional cues in terms of aromas. Do I smell leather? Do I smell, cooked fruit? And you ignore the rest. That's how your brain is trained. You are looking for cues. You're not looking to discover all the aromas or the taste that the wine can express. Another bias is what I call the logical bias. And it happened to me the first time I was poured in orange wine. And I've never tasted orange wine before, and it looked very orangey to me. And immediately I thought, oh my God, this wine is oxidized. And the next thing I know, I smell, all these beautiful fresh fruit and floral notes. And then I look at the bottle and it describes, the process of making orange wine. It's a white wine, made with skin contact. So it extracts more flavors from the skin. So I started to judge the wine before even tasting it. And if I was not a curious sensory explorer, I would just probably say, well, it's an oxidized. I don't even touch it. So I wouldn't give a chance to the wine. Another bias that just relying on appearance can create is what we call the halo effect. When you are asked to evaluate, intensity, is it low, medium, or high intense? And if you see a deep purple colored wine, you start thinking, well, it's deep in color, so it's very intense. Well, what does it tell me? Probably it has a lot of dark fruits, and probably the dark fruit intensity is high. So you start, extrapolating what you see in terms of intensity to what you should perceive in terms of intensity of aroma or taste. So again, you create stories that may be correct or wrong. But the thing is, because you create your stories, your brain will do all the efforts to confirm those stories when you taste. And that's a pity because, again, you don't give a chance to the wine to reveal the other aspects that might be very interesting, like in my orange case story that I shared. So traditional wine tasting, I think, put too much emphasis on the wine appearance attributes, and it can be misleading. And even wine experts or sensory experts like me can be fooled. And there has been a famous study conducted by Gilles Moreau and collaborator and published in 2001. It was conducted in Bordeaux, and they called their paper The Color of Odors. So try to think about what this experiment was. They invited wine experts and wine students who had been trained in the traditional wine tasting approach, using deductive methods. And they presented them with a set of white wine and a set of red wines. So there were, I think, 54 wine experts in total. And their task when presented the two white wines and two red wines, their task was to describe the wine as they are used to, so following their methods. So the researchers played a trick to the participants. They serve a white wine and a red wine, but unknown to the participant, the red wine was the same white wine, but colored with a red dye. So the hypothesis of the researchers was that this is the same white wine, so the color shouldn't affect the perception or the description of the wine by the experts. This is the same wine. It should smell and taste the same. However, the results were different. The wine experts, the 54 participants, overall described the white wine with typical white wine aromas and the red wine with typical red wine aromas, so more on the red fruit rather than the yellow fruit or the white flowers for the white wine. So it's very intriguing, and we could discuss the condition of this experiment, but the results is a good demonstration on how even wine experts with all their training and their knowledge can be influenced by the appearance, by the color of a wine. So just visually, the color really overpowered the other perceptions that these very well-trained participants were having while smelling and tasting the wine. So visual bias exists for everyone. So as a sensory scientist, what we usually do when we compare wines with different appearance and really want to focus on the aroma description or the flavor description, we use black glasses, or we try to use colored lights in the room to really minimize the appearance difference among the set of the wines that we ask our tasters to evaluate. Obviously, in this example, in this study by Gilles Moreau and collaborator, they really wanted to see the impact of the color. But probably one of my hypotheses is if the wines had been served in black glasses, obviously the color wouldn't have any influence. And the participants, the well-trained participants, would have noticed that the wines were quite similar. So should we ignore wine appearance all the time? Should we ignore those wine appearance attributes? No, not at all, of course. Appearance attributes are really useful, especially when you are a wine judge or you're doing a technical evaluation. Now, I'm a wine judge and I can judge commercial and amateur wines. And these wines are not exempt of faults. So if you evaluate this wine appearance can definitely give you indication of a potential fault. So my recommendation is if you start by smelling and smell something a bit off, make sure that you look at the wine, and there are certain type of appearance attributes that are good indication of a faulty wine. For example, if the wine is hazy, it could be an indication of microbiological spoilage. Or if you see, bubbles at the surface of the glass, it could be a sign of re-fermentation, the yeast still active, fermenting in the wine. Or it could be the color, as I mentioned earlier, creating some expectations, oxidation, and some faults. So if you're in a situation of controlling the quality of the wine or judging wines for a medal or a competition or an appellation, wine appearance is important because you want to discard faulty wines. But usually the faulty wines, you get them also by smelling something off. So I wouldn't rely solely on appearance first, because a hazy wine might not be a faulty wine. And maybe some bubbles might not mean fermentation. So I would check, I would smell first and then check the appearance if I have any doubt based on my nose evaluation. So why do I recommend assessing appearance last? And why it doesn't really affect your evaluation as a wine taster, as a wine student, learning about wine regions, wine qualities, learning about the different styles out there? Because wine appearance is pretty stable. However, when we talk about aromas are very volatile, which is the definition of an aroma compound. And what you smell at the beginning of the evaluation might not be the same at the end of the evaluation. With the wine warming up, with the most volatile aromas coming out first and then the least volatile coming later, the aromatic profile is very dynamic. It can change very quickly over time. So that's why when you are evaluating the wines, first, by smell, you have the most likelihood of picking up more aromas than if you wait to go through all the detailed appearance attribute evaluation. And finally, the appearance attributes, as I mentioned, are very stable. The color and the clarity won't change with time. You can check the appearance at the end of the evaluation. And as I mentioned, there are several biases that can be induced by those visual cues. We talk about expectation bias, logical bias, and halo bias. So these cues can really impact your evaluation in a very unconscious manner. You don't realize it that you are impacted, biased by what you see, and that it impacts your perception because your brain is doing the interpretation of your perception. The perception is in the interpretation of the sensation, and that's a cognitive exercise. So your brain is telling you stuff that maybe your senses were not initially communicating. So be careful about these visual cues. So how do I taste wine as a sensory scientist? Well, as I mentioned, always smell first. I always smell first without swirling, and then I swirl to aerate the wine and smell again. And then I taste the wine to experience what else do I perceive in terms of taste, on the tongue, feeling in the mouth. Do I confirm the aromatic perception that I have by smelling? Do I discover new ones? And finally, how is the wine finish? So at the end of this sensory evaluation, I can look at the wine definitely and observe that this particular wine is clear. It has a yellow color and it's very bright. It's beautiful. So appearance won't change if you wait until the end. And by the way, in her book, The Wine Bible, Karen McNeil also mentioned that she evaluates a wine appearance last. So, you won't be alone if you adopt this very simple practice that can really minimize any bias in your wine evaluation. So try it next time if you want to evaluate a wine. And I created a wine tasting guide that you can download. You can find the link below, where I guide you through 10 steps to evaluate a wine, starting by smelling and finishing by describing wine attributes. So to recap, what you see affects what you smell and taste unconsciously, and assessing wine appearance first and in detail biases everything else, what you smell and what you taste. Wine appearance is important, don't hear me wrong. It's important, it can give you cues when you are controlling the quality of the wine. But when you want to learn about wine and understand the different stylistic expression of a wine appearance can be misleading. So my recommendation is to rely more on your sense of smell and taste rather than your sense of sight to learn about those stylistic differences, to learn about the impact of the region, to learn about the impact of the soil and the climate on the wine qualities. And this practice will help you become a more confident and discerning taster by using those other senses rather than relying heavily on what you see. So if you want to continue exploring wine through the sensory lens, I invite you to join my community, The Curious Palates, hosted on School, where I share a lot of these tips. And if you like this video, subscribe to this channel for more sense-backed tasting tips that you won't hear in traditional wine tasting schools. Thank you. À bientôt.